EDCA sites, yung joint patrols po natin and exercises so that our territory is not used for offensive operations unrelated to Philippine defense and security.
Yeah. Well, under the Constitution ho, hindi ho pwede silang magtayo ng base militar ho dito. So itong mga EDCA sites ay ginagamit ho to for joint exercises as well as disaster preparedness. So ang may-ari po ng mga lupa ay tayo pa rin, ang Pilipinas pa rin. Ang nag-ooperate rin po ay tayo pa rin, ang Pilipinas pa rin. So wala ho silang responsibility sa pag-ooperate ho nun.
Given the inclusion of EDCA, Mr. President, EDCA sites near Taiwan Strait and the WPS, what risk assessment has DND made that these facilities will not become targets in a possible U.S.-China conflict, not our own making?
Based on the reply of the good secretary, their risk assessment is very low, Mr. President.
With the reciprocal access agreement with Japan, enhanced defense cooperation with Australia, what types of operations are explicitly ruled out on Philippine soil or in waters? Example, preemptive strikes, offensive cyber operations, long-range missiles deployments. If you can please specify, Mr. President.
Ang limitation po ay offensive operation and anything that will and anything that will pertain to engagement in war, Mr. President, as an instrument of national policy, Mr. President.
Mr. President, does the Department of National Defense agree that a decision of the Supreme Court interpreting and applying a provision of EDCA automatically becomes part of EDCA itself?
Mr. President, the reply of the Secretary, it's the dispositive portion reflects that, Mr. President.
Automatically becomes part of.
Well, the question requires an answer either yes or no, Mr. President. What is the dispositive portion, Mr. President?
The reply of the Secretary, Mr. President, it's part of the ruling and it's part of the ratio decidendi, Mr. President.
Of course, the decision of the Supreme Court always form part of our legal system, Mr. President. And we're referring to Ochoa, Sagisag versus Ochoa, Mr. President.
If that is in the ruling, then that is correct, Mr. President.
And therefore, Mr. President, you have to agree that such interpretation of the Supreme Court should automatically form part of EDCA, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Subject to the full Constitution.
And therefore, the DND has the legal mandate to implement that interpretation of the Supreme Court.
Yes, Mr. President, that's correct.
Ang sabi po kasi sa kasong ito, o decision na ito, Mr. President, it was interpreted, meaning Article 4 of EDCA, that the U.S. has unimpeded access only to those military equipment, materiel, and supplies that the Philippines has consented to be prepositioned on Philippine territory.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
could the DND please detail how exactly it is implementing that decision of the Supreme Court, specifically what consent mechanism it is using? Is it the Mutual Defense Board or the Security Engagement Board?
Well, Mr. President, all channels are
Boards merely recommend to
I was informed, Mr. President, that the boards are merely recommends, and the secretaries of the DFA and the DND are the ones who approve it, Mr. President.
When we say the boards, Mr. President, we're referring to MDB and the SEB.
Yes, Mr. President, correct.
How many come from the Philippine side, Mr. President? And what is the voting requirement?
It's 7-7, Mr. President, in the board.
but the board is merely
Has there been an instance, Mr. President, when the Philippines did not allow the U.S. to preposition a certain military equipment, materiel, or personnel?
Well, Mr. President, the Secretary relayed that they're not at liberty to divulge that the answer to that, Mr. President.
May we know the reason, Mr. President?
Well, Mr. President, because it forms part of the Mutual Defense Treaty, and it's also part of the operational security, and the President needs to approve the release of that information, Mr. President.
Mr. President, the armed forces of the Philippines mentioned that certain U.S. missiles should be prepositioned in the Philippines. Are these nuclear-capable missiles, Mr. President?
Mr. President, no, they're not. They're not nuclear missiles, Mr. President.
Mr. President, the 2006 U.S.-Bulgaria Defense Cooperation Agreement, the 2009 U.S.-Poland Status of Forces Agreement, and the 2014 U.S.-Australian Force Posture Agreement all explicitly require the United States forces to notify and obtain the exclusive consent of the host government regarding the type of defense equipment, supplies, or material to be propositioned. The U.S.-Australia agreement even provides for a snapback by the Australian Parliament. The Philippines, or the Philippine EDCA, does not have such consent provision. Why is the Department of National Defense not insisting on that insertion of such sovereign provision, Mr. President?
Well, Mr. President, provision, the reply of the Secretary, the provision is not necessary because
Why?
the guiding document will be the Constitution, Mr. President.
But Mr. President, would not such sovereign provision ensure the independence of our foreign and security policies? Aside, of course, from the Constitution.
Well, Mr. President, any action in relation to the EDCA sites, the Philippine side will have the final say, Mr. President.
Mr. President, the Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces recently said that all the investigations into and protest against the government corruption are causing destabilization and benefiting China. Do you agree that the work of the Senate Blue Ribbon Committee is destabilizing the Philippine government?
Well, personally, Mr. President, that's part of our mandate under the Constitution.
Yes.
And the investigation is in aid of legislation, Mr. President.
Kaya nga po, kaya hindi tayo nagdi-destabilize kahit na po tayo ay gumagawa ng pagdinig laban sa corruption na nangyayari sa ating bansa, lalong-lalo na po itong karumal-dumal na flood control projects na nakita po natin kung ano ang...
Mr. President, well, thank you, Mr. President, for asking that question. It gives the Chief of Staff the opportunity to clarify and also to straighten the answers, Mr. President. He never said that the investigation would lead to destabilization or any instability in our political system. What he mentioned is withdrawal of the support of the AFP will lead to destabilization. So, and that's very clear, Mr. President, the difference between the responsibilities of the legislature in aid of legislation and also the withdrawal of the support of the military, Mr. President.
Do you agree in the Philippines one China policy? Do you agree with Japan that any forcible unification of China and Taiwan is a threat to Philippine security?
Well, Mr. President, the policy is we adhere to the One China policy. But of course, the actions succeeding to that will be subject for discussion, Mr. President.
And you do not agree with Japan?
Mr. President, for now that is hypothetical, and it's yeah, correct. It's hypothetical, and that is the statement of Japan, Mr. President.
Mr. President, Vietnam's policy of no military alliance has enabled it to develop an indigenous capability to produce military drones. Do you think the Philippines should forever rely on external military assistance or try to stand on our own?
Well, that's the direction, Mr. President, to be self-reliant on our military needs, Mr. President. And hopefully, later on, we can invite investors to come here and build facilities that will manufacture drones and other military equipment, Mr. President. That's the aspiration, Mr. President.
But only if conditions will provide in order for this opportunity to come in the near future.
Mr. President, the proposal of the Department of National Defense is to amend the Self-reliant Defense Posture Law. That will allow equity investments, Mr. President, in the Philippines, so that we can attract defense manufacturers to come here to the Philippines. Like, for example, Korea is a big defense exporter, and we can invite them to set up shop here, Mr. President. That is the direction.
What lessons from the Russian-Ukraine war have our experts in the DND derived in relation to the need for indigenous military capability?